Anyway, this little girl, Casey Shore, as she's known, and she wasn't, that's not her real name. I know her real name, and I've got actually the records on that case. She had an intestinal infection that it was fairly drastic, and her pediatrician had asked for a referral to the Children's Hospital in Seattle. And he called into Trillium and got a hold of Dr. Anna Stern, who approved the referral. And what happened was they had a group of executives that was actually, it was Terry Copeland, Patrice Korjenik, David Cole, Shannon Conley, sometimes Amanda Cobb, and sometimes, usually Dr. Sottenspiel, and sometimes another doctor named Thomas Wiest.
So Dr. John Sottenspiel.
Yeah, he was the chief medical officer. And what happened was they turned down, they went, when they found out that it was going to cost, I think it was $50,000, they went, oh, no.
For the referral?
Yeah, for the referral, because it was quite a bit of money. There was going to be a lot of money for the treatment and for living expenses for the parents and everything else while they were up there with their little girl being treated. And they turned it down.
So her life wasn't worth $50,000 to them then.
Well, I'm saying $50,000 because that's what I was told was the outside highest possible expense, and it could have been much less, but I don't know. I just know that they turned it down and they reversed the referral. They had Dr. Sottenspiel reverse it. They called in Dr. Stern and threatened to fire her and destroy her. You have to remember that Trillium also controlled, and still does, the medical credentials for doctors.
Through Stoll Reeves.
Yeah, through Stoll Reeves. It's called IPS, Independent Professional Services, and so you can. That's where all of the credentials and everything are basically tracked. So that, and I saw this happen too. If you happen to have the right kind of money and political pull, you could actually get approval through the referral process. So there's doctors running around Oregon right now that really aren't credentialed to be doctors, but they are credentialed by IPS.
What do you mean by that exactly?
You can buy credentials in Oregon.
Really?
Really?
And so the Oregon Medical Board is okay with that? Are they aware of it?
I would imagine they are.
And so what, maybe we're sidetracking here a little bit, but I think it's such an important point. So what is going on with that?
You have to realize that some of the people I reported some of this stuff to was the Oregon Medical Board. I mean, there's a really weird little thing that a lot of seniors are going through in this state that people don't realize is that there's a thing called assignment. When a doctor takes Medicare, listen, when they take Medicare, they agree to take a certain set amount that's set by the physician's fee schedule. Most doctors in Oregon, because of the Oregon Medical Board and OHA, ignore the physician's fee schedule and charge more. So most seniors that end up with a bill where they quote a copay of anywhere from $50 to several $100 or several $1,000 off of a bill don't really owe it. What is happening is they ignore the federal law governing it, what the ceiling on prices is, because of the Oregon Medical Board's involved in this stuff, and they're charging. I mean, it's like if you were to total this up, because this is claimable back for 10 years, you're looking at fraud that's in the billions of dollars.
But again, getting back to the credentialing, and these doctors that are in Oregon they are physicians, right? I mean, these people are being credentialed, are MDs. They went to medical school and did an internship and residency, or
I don't know. I do know that some of them had problems in other states, and then they ended up getting credentialed in Oregon.
And how do they do that? Because there seems to be that once a physician, and I know personally, that once a physician is tagged by a particular medical board, that goes to the Federation of State Medical Boards, and then that goes out to every medical board in the United States.
Where
And
do
then
you
you're
think
not
the
able to get a
medical board-
license anywhere, or you lose your licenses that you already had in other states.
The people who are in charge of all the credentials and keeping all of that information is IDS.
So if I called Stoll Reeves and said I'm willing to pay to be credentialed, they might consider that?
Maybe. They're a pretty corrupt outfit. I can get in trouble for saying that, but I think they are. I think if you were to look at some of the things that they've done, they are as sketchy as they come.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you'd have
And they
any
work
problems
for
proving
the
that in court.
they-
I don't think
they
they're going to.
do stuff for the state constantly. I would be shocked if the Oregon Medical Board didn't know all about that part of it, because I've reported other stuff to them. I mean, I've talked with OHA, with the Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Medical Board, and with Saxton and all those people there about the problems that I have seen over the years with Trillium. I was doing it when I was an employee there, clear back in 2011 and 2012 and 2013, and then after I was fired in 2014 and 2015. I mean, these people know what's going on. It's kind of like, it's really impossible for someone like Merkley, is a good example, to deny that they don't know what's going on, because I called his office, I gave them records, I told them what's going on.
Well, let's get back to KC again. You were talking, so her health care is going to cost anywhere up to possibly $50,000 to go up to Seattle. And Dr. John Sattenspiel overturned the okay for the referral by Dr. Anna Stern.
Stern and destroy her. And what if she said anything? She came over to my house. She was very upset. She spoke with, at the time, my daughter, my wife, a friend of ours named Erhausen was there, Shannon Erhausen, and another friend, Roberta Christensen, were all there at the house. And she came over because she was adopting a child, and she wanted to observe the interaction of my daughter with her children. And so she was there, and then late in the afternoon she started talking about this little girl. And so I got her perspective on this case, and she told me about Dr. Sattenspiel overturning the referral and about this basically non-medical board making decisions. I've got that, by the way, on my calendar marked down so I can give you the actual date and everything else of when that took place. And it's covered in declarations that were written to the court. So it's like, it's not any great secret. It's all there. And
those declarations are public information, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Because they've gone to the courts.
Well, that's one of the problems you're going to face with Ann Aiken's court. I would send recordings and I would send declarations with affidavits and declarations, everything done legally. And they would go to the court and they would never end up on the record.
So,
And I don't know what happened to some of them. Some of them supposedly do appear on the record, but I don't know if those recordings are there and obtainable or not. If somebody needs them, they can contact me and I'll give them to them. It's like, this stuff is way beyond what anybody expects, and they need to know about it. The public does.
So,
but at any rate, they turned it down, and then afterwards her pediatrician appealed that, and they put her through a process where they basically deny. And it's really an interesting, but it's scripted. It sounds, to a patient, it looks like it's extemporaneous, but it's not. It's actually contrived and it's done on purpose. What they do is they will say that you have a post procedure request, that your request is for a procedure that's already taken place, and so it's denied. Then and it's scripted, so you'll get this and you'll go, well, no, my doctor is trying to get an approval for this procedure. And then what'll happen is they'll come back and they'll get that, and they'll go, oh, well, these are the processes you have to go through in order to get a referral. So you have to meet all of these conditions, and then they'll ignore those and come up with new ones, and then they will lose the record, and then you'll have to start the whole procedure all over again. They will take 2 years. That's what they did with Randall and with Barbara Wagner and with dozens of other patients that were trying to get chemotherapy. They put them through the mill, which is what they called the procedure, but I don't know if that was just a formal name or it was just some term that they applied to the process. But they would put them through the mill, and they would just go through this over and over and over. And after a year or 2 years, the cancer would metastasize and spread, or your colon, in the case of this little girl, it will turn into ulcerative colitis, and it ended up perforating the lower intestine, and then she had to go to Dornbecker for emergency surgery, which was botched because they ended up removing all of her intestines, and then gave her
all of her intestines. You mean her colon and her large and small intestines, or just
according to the records that I've seen? Yeah,
they removed everything. Wow, that's.
And then what happened was they put her on a medication that was for adults, not for kids, to control the swelling because she swelled up like she was a snake bite victim.
Remicade.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then she died in agony.
So
4.5 years old. She was actually almost 5.
So in reality,
killed her.
In reality, she actually had ulcerative colitis. They just thought it was an infection because you wouldn't get an infection and then ulcerative colitis would come after that typically so quickly. Ulcerative colitis is an autoimmune disorder like lupus or like rheumatoid arthritis or it's an inflammatory bowel disorder. So she probably had that at that point, and probably what was happening, I suspect, is that the ulcerative colitis had damaged the lining of the colon to such a degree that infection was able to ensue. So basically, she never really got diagnosed until they got in there and did the surgery emergently and looked at the pathology.
She got diagnosed when she almost died.
Exactly, during the surgery.
When she had gone without treatment for a year, because Trillium was saving money for bonuses. I mean, you have to realize, what was Trillium doing? They got $650 a month for each patient. The money that they didn't spend on those patients went to their reserve accounts, and they got to keep the reserve accounts. In Oregon, those reserves basically convert to money that belongs to the company. They're no longer for health care. They don't turn over on a year-to-year basis. They basically just add value to the company. So in the case of Trillium, it was worth like $60 million or $80 million in reserves. So when they were bought by Centene ended up getting $80 million.
So that money that's in the reserve is basically, it's supposed to be a backstop, correct? I mean, it's supposed to be a backstop to if there's any.
Not in Oregon.
But not in Oregon. But I'm just saying it's supposed to be that. In Oregon, it reverts back to the corporation, and they can use it whatever way they want to at that point.
It doesn't revert back to the corporation because it starts out as taxpayer money. It's money for patient care, and the corporation literally steals it.
Right.
That's what's happening in Oregon, and that's what Trillium did, and that's what most of these other contractors are doing when they deny care to these kids. I mean, if you look at the records that I've got for foster kids, and you can't, but I'm sure I could find a lawyer that's willing to take this thing and drive it down their throats. These foster kids are denied care at a just unconscionable rate. I mean, it's crazy. It's like there's a 98% denial rate for Native American children for referrals. 98%. How do you justify that? These are kids that are probably the least healthy population in Lane County, and you're denying 98% of them medical care? They've done the same thing with undocumented workers. It's like you get Hispanics. If you go to a hospital, down there, especially in Lane County, but I'll bet you up here too, those hospital emergency rooms will have Spanish things. Sign up for the Oregon Healthcare Program. And so they're not enrolled by the Oregon Healthcare Program. They're not enrolled by Salem. They're enrolled by the contractor.
By the
and the
CCO.
contractor doesn't do a background check. They just enroll them. They're a warm body. And what they get is $650 a month for that warm body. So they sign them up by the thousands. And one of the things that Dennis Richardson did is he checked, and he went, 45% of the patients on the Oregon Healthcare Program are undocumented immigrants, and they need to be gotten off the program. Well, what's happened is Brown changed the law, and I agree with her on that. We're probably on different sides of the fence there. I'm relatively liberal in that way. I think that providing, especially undocumented mothers and children with medical care that are in this country, and I don't care if they're here illegally or legally, I think it's something that's responsible and right to do. I think that all children deserve a half decent chance at life and health and happiness. And we're screwing them. We're not giving it to them. I mean, 2% of Hispanic kids, 1% of Native American foster kids, 1% get referrals.
Yeah,
The medical care that these kids are getting is abysmal. For Hispanic kids, it was 8%. 8%.
Yeah, you'd given me some numbers on this, and what the numbers that you gave me was that if you were an Oregon Health Plan child that was Caucasian in a, quote, intact family, and I use quote because an intact family can mean a lot of different things, that there was a 26% chance that you'd get a referral. But if all of a sudden you were a foster kid...
No. Yeah, for foster kids it was 26%. For an intact family, your chances of getting a referral was around 2/3, around 60%.
Well, what you had showed me was that it was 26% for the Oregon Health Plan kids that were Caucasian, but that if they were in a foster family, it dropped down to 13%, and that for Native Americans it was about 9.5%, for African Americans it was around 8.5%, and for Hispanic kids it was about a 6.4%.
I'm trying to find where the actual records are. I'm sitting here staring at them right now, at the records.
Yeah, and I mean that's numbers that I got from you, because I wouldn't come up with those numbers myself.
No. And I'm sitting here staring at the records right now. I've got these are foster kids that are all on the Oregon Healthcare Program that are Hispanic, and these are Spanish-speaking children. And the denial of referral rate is...
Well, I wasn't looking. What you gave me wasn't the denial. What you gave me was the acceptance of, where they gave them the referral.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the denial rate because I'm looking at...
Would the denial rate just be the opposite of the...
I'm looking at it backwards from how you're looking at it. What I was looking at was the denial rate, and then the approval rate. For instance, like with black kids over here on this one report, the approval rate for black kids was 8%. So I look at the denial rate as 92%.
Right. Yeah, it's just the exact opposite.
The approval rate for white kids in this one report is 66%. Okay.
Was that for the athletes or was that for kids?
That was for kids.
Okay.
The athletes was about the same. That was 65%.
65%. Okay. Well, maybe I need to make some changes myself
and
too, because
the other thing is that black athletes, that's because they're kids. I mean, they were denied referrals and anything other than medical care at their primary care doctor 3/4 of the time.
And you're talking about when you're talking about these, what we're talking about is college kids who were at University of Oregon that were involved with their sports.
Yeah, and if they were basically treated like animals. They performed, and if they got sick or injured, they were basically kicked to the curb.
Was that done by the coaches, or was that done by the institution, the University of Oregon? Was that done by the state, or was that just all Trillium?
I think it was Trillium. I think this goes beyond just Trillium. It's systemic. It's statewide.
Wouldn't you think that the coaches would be concerned about this if they're, especially if it's one of their star athletes, isn't getting the referral that they need?
I don't know. I don't think so. I saw this happen with one guy who was a quarterback at the University of Oregon, and he was injured, and they played him anyways, and then he got even more seriously injured. In fact, it ended his career, and he
was black?
Yeah. So is KC, mixed race.
Yeah, she was mixed, white and black, yeah.
But it's like they mistreated. They mistreated him. They basically ruined his career. He could have been a pro quarterback. He did the best fake plays you ever seen in your life. He would act like he was going to throw the ball, and the ball would end up behind him, and somebody would run up behind him and pick it up, and he looked like the ball was heading downfield. He was great at deceiving the other teams. He was fabulous, and he got injured, and they kept playing him and denying the kind of care he needed, and they basically wrecked his career. His whole career was just shot, and he was here in Lane County. No, this is not Lane County, but that's where he was. And
what's a football coach get paid? About $30 million a year, or I don't know, $10 million?
Don't know.
$5 million? An outrageous, atrocious amount considering what they do for a living.
Out of my league. I don't know how much money they make. It's kind of like we're dealing with sums of money that are just beyond me. I'm an engineer and a DBA and a human being trying to do the right thing, and I don't have a ton of money. In fact, I have nothing now. I now have a bunch of injuries and about $150,000 in medical bills, and I'm probably not likely to live through what's happened to me. But I'm no different than these kids. I mean, these kids are much younger than me. I'm 72, and my life's pretty much over. A lot of these children that have been just beaten to a pulp are they don't have a chance of life.
Well, you look at this little girl that's 4 years old, and her life was just tossed over. At the most, I mean, we don't know what the most would have been, but let's just say it was $50,000 for her to go up to Seattle. Her life wasn't worth $50,000 to them, and you know that someone like Dr. John Sattenspiel or any of the other people associated with Trillium Health would have never let that happen to themselves, their families, or their children. Yeah. I suspect they would have. Maybe they're so greedy they would have let that go too. I don't know. Denied their own family a referral.
But some of these things are just heartbreaking. It's like I'm looking at records, and again, I wish I could show them to you, but I've got records here of foster kids that they were born to parents, and some of them have horrific problems.
Well, you'll be able to show these, Mike. You can take whatever documents you want when this goes up online, and we can put those documents on there in addition. People can go to those too.
Yeah, but if I do, if I put these things, I would love nothing more in the world than to publish all of this stuff. But Aiken would put me in prison for the rest of my life if I did that.
Oh, that's right. The courts are keeping you from doing that.
The problem that you're looking at is that Stroh Reeves managed to get an attorney that had been appointed. Actually, there's two different attorneys that were appointed to represent me, and they stole documents. That's what's really interesting, and gave them to Stroh Reeves. And somewhere along the line, a bunch of those documents, they stole them from a law office. It was Lyman and Johnson in Eugene. And I don't know how they ended up, but they're with the press. It's like I'm getting phone calls, and I have for about the past 2 years. I'll get a call once in a while from a reporter wanting to know about XYZ record, and I keep telling them I can't talk about that. I don't want to go to prison. But those records are out there floating around, and I want to. In fact, I am thinking very seriously of doing it, of telling them what they've got. I don't think they realize what they're staring at. some of these records show so much illegal activity. It's crazy. It's like the ones for drug sales that I talk about earlier. I think I talked about the illegal drug sales. Those records are out there floating around. I mean, I don't think they realize what they've got. I mean, you're looking at somebody who's selling over $1 million worth of illegal, opiates alone on the street every single month.
Well, I bet the DEA would be quite interested in that, because they seem to be very interested in doctors that are diverting narcotics. It seems like they'd be interested in Trillium Health, but we'll find out, right?
Nobody's interested in that stuff. I'm convinced of it. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this. It's like this Bush, county commissioner.
Heather Bush, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the things about it is that when they have these those hotspotter reports, and the doctors drop patients, we had 23,000 patients that didn't have doctors, and Trillium ended up lying on the federal reports. I kept calling and calling and calling, and finally another DBA got fired, and similar circumstances, and he ended up going to them too. Well, it was impossible for CMS and everybody to overlook this anymore, and so they went in and investigated and went, whoa, there's 23,000 patients without a primary care doctor, and that makes Trillium out of compliance with their contracts. We're going to have to end their contract. Well, what happened was Lane County took low-income housing money, this money for kids, for health care for children, and they set up 2 clinics and took all 23,000 patients and stuck them under 2 clinics staffed by a total of 4 doctors. So each doctor ended up with about 6,000 patients that they were primary care doctor for. Impossible to see, but it met the requirements of the law. And it was paid for by stealing money, Lane County, stealing money from low-income kids and families.
It was diverted, and you feel that...
No, it was stolen. Everybody says diverted. It was stolen.
Either way, it was moved, and you feel that the person responsible for that is Mr. Farr, the city council member.
It was,
or he was
his
at least part of it.
His wife worked for Trillium. She was a communications officer there and their head lobbyist. So yeah, but it was, Bush knew all about this. I mean, I sat there and talked with her in my living room about it. So she knew about it.
What was she doing in your living room, out of curiosity?
She was actually going door-to-door campaigning. And I said, come on in, I want to talk to you. And I showed her some of the records and said, what's going on? Not only that, one of the things that Trillium did is they attempted to get, it was House Bill 3400 or 3300. And this was in 2015. And what they did is they had a bunch of House members that they paid money to pass a piece of legislation that would have forced doctors in Lane County to take those patients that had been dropped. So they created the problem, and then they were going to try to force other doctors to take those patients. And they paid money to politicians to do it. The politician full well knew what was going on. I told them what was going on. They knew what was going on, and they still did it.
Well, let's talk about those politicians a little bit, because it seems to me that a lot of these politicians run on the fact that they care about children. I mean, it's in their advertising. It's the way they promote themselves. I know I saw that with Bush. I saw that with Mr. Jim Torrey, who used to be the mayor of Eugene. I saw that with Mr. McLean, Michael McLean, that was the state senator, who's now was appointed by Governor Brown to be a circuit court judge.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about these people, who they are, how they were involved in the situation, like Mr. Torrey, etc. And let's expose how little they really do care about children, at least poor children.
Sure. I'm looking for the one thing. I was looking for the list of politicians, because I have down here, one of the things I had access to was records, and I know which politicians got how much money to try to support that bill.
That's
So if
valuable
somebody,
information.
if some police officer wants to actually go through and actually do the law, to support the law and enforce the law, I can give them all the information they need to enforce the law, and they could bust the politicians. And again, I want to stress one thing about it is everybody keeps going Republican, Democrat. These county commissioners and legislators that did it were Republican and Democrat. It was both parties. I mean,
Both sides of the aisle, yeah.
oh yeah. I mean, if you trust either party, you're wrong. One of the worst ones was Merkley. It's like he had Atkins call me and talk with me for over an hour, and I told them everything that was
This is
going
Gene
on.
Atkins, who was his
And-
senior staff member and who eventually became
She was
Secretary of
his
State.
chief of staff.
Chief of staff, and she became Secretary of State after
Oh, yeah.
Brown became governor when Kitzhaber was left in disgrace.
It's worse than that. What I was told by people that I know inside of the state is that when she went scurrying off to the state and told them what I'd said.
What do you mean in regards to what Trillium was up to?
Yeah,
She told who? Just
told Brown and Rosenblum.
who already knew anyways, because you were already in contact with them.
Yeah, she didn't know everything. People don't know everything that I know still to this day. It's like I have records on stuff that you cannot imagine. I've spent years collecting records when I was working there. I mean, these people are real slime.
Well, let's talk about some specific people. So you had who's now city council member of Eugene, Heather Bush, or is it Booch?
Yeah, she's not a city council, she's a county commissioner.
Oh, county commissioner, excuse me. So she's a county commissioner, and she came to your home. She knocked on the door, and you sat there and you spoke with her. And what came out of that? What occurred there?
She said that she would get back to me after the election if she was elected. I actually voted for her. She was elected, and she didn't do anything.
Did you contact her?
Yep.
Did you ever speak with her personally again, or just
Nope.
the typical? You hit one of the staff members, and it's like, okay, yeah, we'll let her know. Click.
No, it was worse than that. I actually wrote a couple of letters and made phone calls and nothing.
Oh, okay. So she's a big protector of the children, from what I saw on her website, and obviously she doesn't care much about children. It seems like, except all she
I don't-
really cares about is her position of power, which
That's-
seems to be the ultimate goal of 99% of politicians, is how much power they have and how much money they can extract with that power.
There was a guy down there that was running for the Senate or the House, and I cannot remember his name, but he was a veteran and was also for the children. And I talked with he and a woman came to my door, and they were also campaigning, and I talked with them. I try to talk with every possible politician I can in the hopes that one of them will pay attention. And he also was going to do something about it, and he also did nothing. I mean, I think a lot of people tend to think that this is somehow or another a partisan thing. And I believe that is because I hammer Brown and Rosenblum. That's just because I'm so disappointed in them. I mean, they could have done so much good, and they could have fixed this thing 10 years ago, and they didn't.
Well, it's obvious from all the other press about them and all the other devious endeavors they've been involved with that they're criminals. I mean, I'm going to be honest about it. They're criminals. We know they're criminals. Majority of people in this, or at least a large proportion of people in this state, think that they're criminals. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep trying to recall Kate Brown. And if they knew what Rosenblum was up to, they'd be trying to recall her too, and she may be next. But anyway, so you spoke with Miss Bush. And then let's talk about somebody else. How about Jim Torrey? What can you tell me about Jim Torrey?
Jim Torrey was the former mayor of Eugene, and he got quite a bit of money. I can even tell you how much. That's the other thing that you're going to that's really disgraceful. is the amount of money that these guys got that's claimed in the newspaper versus the amount of money in the actual shareholder records that I've got in my possession that shows how much money they actually got are two different things. As far as I can determine, most of the people ended up committing tax fraud. They seem to, you seem to have people like Copeland claiming that he got like $5.6 million, and the records that I've got seem to show that he got around $12 million. I mean, this just goes on over and over and over and over.
So what about Jim? Oh, he was the mayor.
Tory got.
Yeah.
In just a second here, I'm bringing it up right now. And Randall Pape is another one that got a ton
We'll
of
get to
money.
him. Yeah, we're going to get to him.
Tory was a board member, and I show him with 1814, which is 3.6 million.
So 1,814 shares of stock. That translates into over $3 million.
Yep.
And so he was a
3.6
former
million.
mayor. He's now a school board member, isn't he?
Yep.
And I saw his advertising. He sure seems to love the children, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
I guess unless they get in the way of him making a buck or two.
Yep.
My God, I'd hate for him to only have gotten $2 million instead of that $3 million plus.
And then Pape is another one. If we look at
But he's
him,
not a politician, though, right? He's a businessman in Eugene area.
Yeah.
And he was on the board, correct?
Yeah, he was on the board too.
And what does he do down there in Eugene?
He owns a construction company. He was actually pretty small fry. He had 750 shares. Looks like he only got about 1.4 million, 1.5 million.
As far as we know, again,
Yeah.
we don't know exacts here because
well, these records that I'm giving you this stuff from is from August 28th of 2013, and they actually didn't get paid for these shares until 2015. Most of these people that I'm referring to were people that were insiders. They're actually getting shares from other people, and they got additional shares. So the number of shares that they had by August of 2015 when they got these things cashed in was vastly higher.
right.
So this is the minimum amount of money. So when I'm saying 1.5 million, it could be double that, but that's how much they had then. And anybody that tells you, oh, well, they could have gotten rid of them, baloney. Nobody who knows that these shares are worth $2,000 a piece is going to be dumping some of these shares early for nothing. They're going to hang on to them because in 2 years, they know what they're worth. If I told you, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you 1,000 shares of stock, and you wait for 2 years and I'll pay you $1,000 a share for them, okay? So you got 1,000 shares worth $1,000 a piece. And somebody comes along and says, well, would you like to sell me your shares for $500 a piece? Are you going to take that 500? No, you're not. In fact, if you're getting more shares every year, because that's what happens, board members are getting 150 shares a year, you're going to take the extra 150 and tack them on to that 1,000 shares that I gave you. And so Tory ended up with Pape is a good example, didn't have 750 shares. He was still getting 150 more shares per year every year he was on the board. So he probably had 1,000 shares by the time this thing was cashed in, which means he was actually collecting somewhere around $2 million.
So Jordan Pape, he was a businessman. I looked into him a little bit. He basically sold construction equipment for all kinds of different projects: agriculture, construction, forestry, etc.
It's Randall Jordan Pape.
Yeah, Randall Jordan Pape. He seems to go by Jordan more than using the Randall, though, at least from what I saw online. But either way, yeah, Randall Jordan Pape. Now, he's a businessman. Now, I guess I can see to some degree why you'd want a businessman associated with your board, although supposedly the people that were already on the board were businessmen too. Why you would need that additional expertise from a guy that has no medical background whatsoever. doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Some of it doesn't make sense to me anyways. Is, for instance, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, okay, for Pacific Source.
What's his name?
What I don't, I have to go look it up, but he was
Okay.
he was the Chief Financial Officer for Pacific Source, who is ostensibly a competitor with Trillium. Ended up with about 500 shares of stock. So how in the heck is that happening? Some of this makes no sense to me at all. They were handing out millions of dollars in shares to people that make no sense. And the problem is that the government knows about this. I talked with a guy named Craig Phillips, who's with the SEC, about this. I have talked with people at the U.S. Department of Justice. I wrote to Attorney General Barr. Before him, I ended up writing to Attorney General Lynch and to,
Sessions?
Yeah, to under Obama. I called to various people trying to get somebody to ask what the heck's going on, because this is not a small amount of money. This is billions of dollars, not just tens of millions. It's billions. The amount of fraud that's committed by Trillium, just in financial fraud, is $2.2 billion. If you were to take a look at the HIPAA violations, because you've got HIPAA violations that I can count, I can give you records for 28,000 people, and it's $250,000 per incident, okay? And you've got tens of thousands of incidents. I calculated this up one time, and it was $6 billion in HIPAA fines.
Wow.
It's an incredible amount of money. The amount of wrongdoing by this one outfit is staggering. The problem is it's not just this one outfit. It's most of OHP.
That's what I was going to say, is that, if you've got someone from Pacific Source that's involved with your CCO, another CCO involved with another CCO, and they're making money off it, it tells me that there's a lot of collusion going on, that all these actors are probably playing the same, except for maybe one here or there, like the one that Lynn Saxton was after.
They were a nonprofit. That was the last nonprofit left in Oregon.
There you go. So she obviously doesn't like nonprofits because she can't profit from a nonprofit. And there's no doubt in my mind, I can't say with 100% certainty because I don't know, but I bet it'd be easy to find out. But I'm sure Lynn Saxton, in one way, shape, or another, benefited significantly financially from what was going on.
Because Trillium was not in the least bit shy about paying money to people. It's like the people that got money, the state employees I have records on, is just staggering. It's crazy. And it's like, I don't know why they managed to store the records, but I've got them.
And so the other
problem they had is that they didn't just have two databases, they actually had four. One of them was on Copeland's computer, and it was on a Mac, and I actually installed that database, and he was the one that populated it. He thought it was private, but every time he logged onto the network at work, I had access to it. Another one was run by his private accountant, who was named Brandy Whitmere. There was another girl that was before her also. And I can give you all of these names if anybody investigator is interested at all. But they kept a separate set of books. And those are the set of books that I thought they submitted to the Oregon Healthcare Program. It's just that when the auditor that was hired by Richardson went there and looked at some of the oddball things that I pointed out in the record set, she found the oddball things there. So the set that Whitmere was doing, which was weird, I mean, they were not real records. They were not the records that I was looking at, because I could see the claims record set off DBF. I could see DTS pulling them over to SQL, so I could see what was in SQL, and I could see them being virtually the same, although the SQL is a subset of the DBF database. And that's something else I'm going to get to in a second. DTS allows me to look at the other database in real time. So I could actually watch them creating fraudulent records. I sat at my desk and took screenshots of them creating fraudulent records. I could see who was doing it, the numbers, and I made screenshots. Thousands of these things. So some of the records that I've got were, for instance, like 20680 is a good example. It's a simple implant procedure for orthopedic surgeons for adjusting a device like an artificial knee or something like this. And what it means is that if you adjust it, it'll be fastened with, say, 6 screws. And what it covers is the adjustment. And what Trillium was doing is they would bill for each puncture, which is illegal. I mean, it specifically says in the law, no, it's the whole device on one device thing. And so they would take something that was a simple adjustment procedure, because it's not deep, it's just under the skin. And that would be a procedure that would cost like $500, and it would suddenly bloom up to $30,000. And they were doing this over and over and over and over and over and over and over. I mean, tens of thousands of times for thousands and thousands of dollars. They ended up basically buying whole businesses with some of this when they got rid of some of the money. As far as I could determine, Slocum Orthopedic in Eugene, which is this really fancy surgical center for orthopedic surgeons, I believe basically was bought and paid for with that money. There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on with them. But it's not just them. It's, I think, most of OHP. I saw them at Trillium, the apropos benefits management, which was busted in 2005 for fraud. And they covered it up. And I don't know how they ended up covering it up. But the 2 officers in charge of that thing were Amanda Cobb and a guy named Eric House. Eric House left Trillium. He was in charge of setting up some of these weird schemes. He went and set up Health.net. And Health.net and Trillium are both now owned by Centene. No mistake there.
And that's Eric House, House, right? Like
Hause.
Hause, okay. And so, again, we've got these politicians, as we were talking about with Jim Tory,
Mark
Ms.
Lee,
Bush.
who knew all about everything and never did a thing.
Yeah, but I mean, ones that purport to be, lovers of children and caring for children. There was also a Republican that was a state senator, was Michael McLean, wasn't it?
Yep.
And you went to him, and he did what? Because he has advertised that says he loves children.
Oh, he became a judge.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that's really particularly awful about this, is that some of these people, and this is again is appearance. It's not a matter of, it's conjecture on my part, but a lot of these people seem to have taken information when they heard it from me, gone to people, and all of a sudden they start cashing in. They start getting money from Trillium, Centene, etc. And I personally think that what I've been doing unwittingly is helping them facilitate a protection racket.
Extortion.
Yep.
Yeah.
They hear about the fraud, they know about the fraud, and what they end up doing is getting a bunch of campaign contributions from these people, and gifts. Gifts. Don't forget the gifts, and there's lots of them.
What kind of gifts are you talking about?
Oh, $40,000 here and there, things
Oh, like
that.
with the kids opera. We'll talk about that too.
No, that's only one of them. There's other ones that went to other people too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. So, any other?
And
I'm trying
they
to think.
kept records of that stuff.
I'm trying to think of any other politicians that you spoke to that openly espoused their extreme love of children and how they care about them and how they're concerned. Wyden, okay. Tell us a little bit about Wyden, because you spoke about
Wyden's office.
Merkley.
They could care less about it. Merkley and Wyden, they knew about the hotspotter reports. I told them about the hotspotter reports. I told them about the Stark Act violations. I told them about the foster kids and the racial component of denying racial minority, people of color, access to medical care. And I have to step back and say that when people go, were they racist? I can't tell you. I just know that they were the least likely, they were the weakest people to be able to go in and file a lawsuit against Trillium, the Oregon Health Authority, and this doctors group that was out of the Oregon Health Authority. I can't even remember the name of them, but it was just, they represent doctors, and they cost, they're in charge of disciplining doctors and things of this sort. I mean, they're out of the Oregon Health Authority, and
Talking about the Oregon Medical Board?
yeah, these people are just.
So you mean they're the weakest? What do you mean that Merkley and Wyden were the weakest?
No, I'm saying that they're these families, these
Oh,
people
the
who are
families,
black,
the poor.
people
the
who
poor.
are Spanish-speaking Hispanics. That was Hispanics had a bad
they're in the worst
treatment
space,
anyways.
yeah.
But Spanish-speaking Hispanics, they had a 2% approval rate for special needs. 2%. Seniors, similar. It was awful.
So, I've personally had a couple of interactions with Ron Wyden. One a number of years ago, in regards to I had questions about the Cassini project, which was a rocket that went off. Won't go into details about that. And it was another issue too. And they say, oh well, here you can contact this person, give them the information, we'll get back in contact with you. And then recently, I about 6 months ago or so, went to one of Ron Wyden's town hall meetings, which I will give him credit for. He has a hell of a lot of them. But if you don't do anything with them, why have them, except just for appearances? But I spoke to him about the Oregon Medical Board and what was going on there, in particular about his Healthcare Quality Information Act of 1986, which he fathered. And he said he hadn't heard any problems with it, didn't know anything about that. But again, exactly. Again,
He
he
heard
passed.
from me about problems with it.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
I know, and he
These
just
are
passed.
numbers. This is not goofy stuff. I've got numbers here, and then I have to back it up so you can't see them all. I have huge databases of reports. I've got the actual patient records sitting here.
Yeah.
I know this stuff. This is not invented. I've got date stamped shots from the database. So you can't fake this stuff. This is real. And Wyden had this for
Yeah.
years. His medical quality stuff is garbage.
Yeah. Well,
It's
what I
fiction.
was speaking to him in particular about was the HICWA, Healthcare Quality Information Act of 1986, which has really destroyed physicians because what it's done is it's given these peer-reviewed situations in hospitals, insurance companies, the Oregon Medical Board, etc., basically absolute immunity. And so what I've found, and maybe you've seen the same, I call it the Wyden shuck and jive. Because he just gets up there and he's dancing and grooving and he's happy because he's at his town hall meeting and he's barely even answering questions. And you go up and if you're not able to answer a question, maybe you can get one in at the end when he's getting ready to scoot off to something else. And he says, "Oh yeah, here, contact this person." You send him information, you never hear anything back. And so again, I like to say it because I like to say it as much as I can. It's the Ron Wyden shuck and jive show.
Well, yes.
So. You gave this information to Ron Wyden. He purports to be a lover of children and their health care. Especially, he seems to be concerned about the elderly. That was his big move into politics. Was the fact that he was concerned about the Medicare population, which, in your opinion, he doesn't seem to even care about them. Am I correct?
Nope, he doesn't. And that's sad. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how to add anything to this. These people have, they all talk about it, but none of them do anything. And what I was looking for here was something that they do in Oregon pretty uniquely and not anyone else. There's a whole bunch of, there's a large body of law by the U.S. Supreme Court on states being held accountable to the law and to federal law, civil rights law. And in Oregon, they've done a couple of different things. This is one of them. I'm reading you. This is Section 6 of ORS 657-685. And it said the employment job shall adopt procedural rules proposed by the Employment Appeals Board necessary for the discharge of the board's duties. Such rules need not conform to common law or statutory rules of evidence and other technical rules of procedure. That typical in Oregon, that's what you've got going on with your board at the OHA. They're not. They're extra legal. They don't have any laws. They can do anything they want. They can reject evidence. They can accept evidence. They can invent evidence. And that's what they do. That's what they've done in every single whistleblower case that's gone to them. They can invent new evidence out of thin air if they want to. And it's legal. There is no law governing what goes on in this state, and people don't realize it.
Well, I know, again, from my Oregon Medical Board experience, I know that
Same thing happened with this House Bill 3300. I found it right here. They opened the 2 clinics, and they just took, that was money that was set up for low-income kids and low-income families. I mean, in Lane County, 26% of the kids go to bed hungry one night a week. 26%. This was money for them. Instead, they took it for this company that paid their executives $10 and $15 and $5 million in bonuses. They stole it from poor people in order to allow these executives to collect these obscene bonuses. This is Lane County commissioners. This is the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
And I, for whistleblowing, had my life destroyed.
Yeah. Well, it seems like when you stand up in this state, that's what happens. Again, all I can go by primarily is what's happened to physicians. And I know what's happened to me. I know that they fabricate evidence. They don't allow discovery. They don't allow due process. They don't believe in constitutional rights.
Here's the guy's name. The CFO at Pacific Source, Peter Davidson.
Peter Davidson, okay.
But like I say, I can, if you want me to cause, hell on earth for people, I've got records on everything. And I can do it, and I will. I'm looking for the chance.
Well, hopefully we're going to have the opportunity to, this is a start. As things move forward, maybe there'll be more opportunity to present some of these things. Again, we're going to have to kind of wait and watch and see what happens with the court with Ann Aiken and how she's going to approach this entire situation and whether she's going to come after you or not. I tend to wonder if she's not a little concerned now that this is going to be made public and there's no way she's going to be able to shut it down. Is she going to be able to do this to you? I don't know. We'll find out. One
of the problems I have with her is that I objected to the appointment of these magistrate judges. One of them had actually worked with the Attorney General.
That's Julie Russo.
Yeah. And she had...
Jolie, Jolie.
And she had
Russo.
worked with the Oregon Department of Justice. And I wrote... there's a federal rule called 73, and basically 73 is pretty simple if you look it up. Rule 73, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 73. Oh, I'm stupid things. Nah. Basically, I'm not on the internet.
Yeah.
Basically, what Rule 73 states is that a magistrate judge cannot preside over a case unless all parties approve of it. And so when I got this notice, I wrote immediately a letter to the chief judge, said, no, I don't approve of this. I disapprove of this, and here's why. I don't have to say the reason, but I did. They ignored it. So I made a phone call. They said, if you push this, we will retaliate against you. And I went, what? This is a
They
court.
put this in writing?
No, it was verbal. But they basically...
Who verbalized that to you?
A clerk. This was at the courthouse, federal courthouse in
Eugene.
in Portland.
or Portland.
And
And was this a eye to eye, or was this over the phone?
this
or
was over the phone.
over the phone.
And they threatened me. And
Did
I
you ask
went,
what that retaliation meant?
oh, I learned what it meant. And so what happened, what you have to understand is that this is March 7th of 2016. I'd gone up to Portland in my car, and I was in a wheelchair at the time. My foot, as I showed you, periodically swells up and I can't walk. And I was on Broadway Street, and a protest led by the two children of Aiken, this group that was protesting I think the Hammonds and the Buckleys
Bundys.
or whatever they're
Yeah.
called, Bundys or something like
Bundys,
that.
yeah, Hammonds and Bundys.
And what I'd have two reasons for really getting ticked off about that. That was our land. That was Shoshone land that was stolen by the state of Oregon and given to ranchers. Well, now they're fighting over, giving it to these white ranchers versus the Bundys and everybody else, and it's turned into this huge thing. Well, what happened was the protesters, the white protesters, dragged me out of my car and beat the crap out of me.
These are Antifa protesters.
They were predecessors to Antifa. They pried the tailgate off the back of my RAV, and I've got a photograph of that, which is like just incredibly disgusting. That's where they shoved in a crowbar. Can you see that?
Yeah, you can see it.
They shoved
Right
a
there below the, right below, put it back up there again, Mike.
Yep, that was one
It's right,
block.
right below the, where the tailgate opens up at, below the light there, the
Yep.
brake light. Yeah.
That was one block at the stop sign, one block north on Broadway Street of the Marriott Hotel, City Center Marriott Hotel in downtown Portland. They pried off the gate, came in howling. I mean, they were just crazy people. I was pretty wounded. I opened my door to try to get away from them. They pushed me onto the ground. The guy with the crowbar threatened to hit me in the head with the crowbar. I was guarding my head like this, and they were kicking me and slapping me.
Well, that's Antifa. Antifa's been around for a little bit, but they really took hold after
Well, this is
Trump
the
was
group that was
elected.
led by Aiken's two kids,
Yeah. Well, let's
who've now gone on to greater things. One of them is now working for the U.S. Department of Justice for Horowitz's division, and I'm not sure where he is. And the other one's working for some kind of a representative thing in government. I mean, it's like these are people that did wrong things. I mean, they attacked people like me. This was awful. They led these rioting things that took place when Trump was elected. Now, I don't like Trump. I'll freely admit that. But rioting over Trump, that's insane. And that's what they were doing. And they did that for 3 nights in Portland. And these guys led this stuff.
Yeah, it was violent Antifa.
How is it that this person is a federal judge? This is crazy. And then she imposed this magistrate judge. And that magistrate judge, when I tried to protest that illegally in Rule 73C to the Ninth Circuit, she opened it up for protests by and motions by Stroh Reeves, which trillions of attorneys, and then dismissed it. I mean, it's like she can't do this. She doesn't have any authority to. She can't even, as a magistrate judge, she cannot even handle dispositive motions. But she was doing
And
it.
Aiken you're talking about?
What? No, I'm talking about Russo.
Russo, okay.
Russo was sitting around
Ann Aiken
handling
is an Article
this
3
stuff,
judge. Yeah.
and she can't even do this legally, and she was doing it and denied it going to the Ninth Circuit. And now you've got Stroh Reeves trying to have this thing thrown out, trying to have it expunged from the record.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, Mike. How did you tell us the pathway that led to the federal courts? Because that's a very interesting story. I mean, you didn't just jump into the federal courts. You actually, it was a process that you went through. So could you take us through that a little bit?
Okay. What I did was I filed when I was the day before I was filed. I read earlier some of the stuff I talked with federal authorities about. I had filed with Boley, and I've got phone records, mind you, in addition to recording everything. And these phone records are for September 26th of 2013. And what you got me doing is calling the EEOC and Oregon OSHA and OSHA, federal OSHA, who refers me to the EEOC as a whistleblower. And I'm getting the records because I want to make sure that I tell you the exact times and lengths of the phone calls. September 26th. There you go. You have me calling the EEOC at 8:31 a.m. 800-669-4000, and that's the Washington D.C. hotline. They referred me to the Seattle office, and so I called them. And then after that, I called Oregon OSHA field office, who they referred me to. And Oregon OSHA tells me that federal OSHA doesn't have any jurisdiction in Oregon. I've got that recorded, and that's a fun one that I think we need to play, for the simple reason that most people don't believe this, and I think it's high time that it comes out.
Well, if you do, kind of turn your microphone down towards the computer so we get a little bit better.
Okay.
Let's see how it sounds on the headphones here.
And this is the Oregon OSHA office. And there is the... That's me calling. This is the OSHA whistleblower.
Kind of put your microphone a little bit closer if you can. Just tilt it.
In order to route your call to your local OSHA area office, please say or enter your 5-digit worksite or home zip code.
This is federal OSHA. Whistleblowers.gov.
7408. If this is correct, press or say 1. Please hold while your call is transferred.
You'll love this.
The background music?
No, what happens is suddenly Oregon OSHA, and I'm really shocked to get them. I'm figuring I'm talking to...
Morning, Oregon OSHA.
This is Oregon OSHA. I'm trying to file a whistleblower retaliation complaint against the state of Oregon.
Against the state of Oregon?
Yes.
The only one I know that does retaliation is the Bureau of Labor. They have a civil rights division.
No, this is actually a whistleblower retaliation. It's Sarbanes-Oxley ACA, as well as physical on-the-job injury.
Let me have you talk to one of the techs, because other than Billy, I don't know. Just a second.
Mind you, when I crushed my foot, this is 2 weeks before getting with a media card, that happened on the job, and they fired me.
Yeah, how do I go about filing a whistleblower? Well, it's actually more convoluted than that. It's a whistleblower retaliation complaint, and it is a on-the-job injury complaint. But it's against the state of Oregon as well as a contractor.
Let's go.
And made representations about filing whistleblower retaliation complaints.
This is bully.
Which they didn't do. Our attorney called me from Bully, and they had me bring a bunch of evidence up to the Portland office and
This is
make
the wolf.
representations about filing whistleblower retaliation complaints, which they didn't do.
Did you get any kind of follow-up information?
I tried. I mean, you would not
No,
believe.
did you receive anything, like from them in writing?
No, I just
Well,
merely.
you should contact them again then, because they can't just do something in a vacuum.
Oh, but they
You
did.
either have to say we accepted your case or we didn't.
No, they said they accepted the case verbally, and I have that as a recording. And then what they ended up doing was they waited for an entire year, and then said that they weren't doing anything. And so I've been kind of scratching my head trying to figure out how in the heck the law works. It's like when I called OSHA, I called their main hotline number, the whatever it is, 202 number, and they want you to.
That's federal. That's not us.
Yeah,
What's this?
That's federal.
I called them, and then they ended up saying, type in your zip code. It was 1-800-321-OSHA. U.S. Department of
Yeah,
Labor.
that's not us. Yeah, we're OSHA, not OSHA.
Listen to me. I called that number. You can try it if you want to. It wants you to enter
No,
your zip
I don't want to. It's not us.
But
It's
it
not us.
is.
That's federal OSHA.
It is.
Federal OSHA doesn't have jurisdiction in Oregon.
Federal OSHA has no jurisdiction in Oregon at all.
Watch this. Neither does the Department of Labor.
But we're a state plan state, so we manage our own state plan, our own OSHA regulations, and Bureau of Labor and Industries for Oregon handles the whistleblower worker retaliation claims. That's the way it works in Oregon.
That's crazy. How do you file a complaint
No, it's
against a
not.
state
That's the
then?
law.
That just does not make any sense. Okay.
It makes plenty of sense because federal OSHA does not have jurisdiction here unless you're on a reservation or a federal controlled military base or something of that nature.
Wow. Okay.
But the number that I gave you is Oregon OSHA, so
Yeah, when I called that number, they said enter your zip code. I entered the zip code, and I ended up transferring
no,
to
you
your
didn't.
office.
No, the number that I gave you, the Eugene number,
Yeah, the Eugene
that's
number.
a 541 number.
But I ended up with you when I called Federal OSHA. They just transferred me straight over to you.
Right, and that's what they do because they don't have any jurisdiction here.
Okay.
Yeah, once they figured out that you were in Oregon, they shot you to the Oregon. And this is technical. I can't do anything except give you information.
Listen to this.
But and if you call the federal labor and industries people, they can't do anything.
The Department of Labor has no jurisdiction in Oregon. I've been told this a half a dozen times now. Nobody believes me.
With the Bureau of Labor and Industries, or what we call
I have 3 of these recordings like this. 3 of them.
971-673-0766.
So what happened was, after getting run around, and they ended up fraudulently creating this. You have to step back and recognize one thing. Under the whistleblower statutes in Oregon, as well as the federal ones, you can file an oral complaint. An oral complaint is just like filing a written complaint. You don't have to mention a statute. You just simply say, I'm a whistleblower, I reported medical fraud or insurance fraud or whatever. And they will look up the appropriate statutes and file for you in your behalf. And in fact, if I could play another recording if you'd like, I've got Jeremy Wolf saying he's filing under Sarbanes-Oxley, and he talks about it, and under the ACA, and under Dodd-Frank, and he talks about as well as HIPAA.
Yeah, well, why don't you go play a little bit of that?
And he talks about the actual laws. So I'm going, okay, I'm more than willing to go along with all of that. And this is Jeremy Wolf.
And Jeremy Wolf was part of BOLI.
He was an
Bureau of-
attorney at Jolie.
He was an attorney at BOLI, okay. Bureau of Labor and Industry.
Yep.
Under Brad Avakian at that time.
Yep.
Another surly character.
Yep.
March 3rd.
Oh yeah, I should. This, I've got metadata on all of these things too. This is me waiting for him to call me. I knew he was calling on this date. He made an appointment to call.
March 3rd, 2014, 2:03. Waiting for a call from Jeremy Wolf from BOLI.
It's interesting because he admits that Oregon spoofs the phone numbers too.
That they what?
They spoof their phone numbers.
What do you mean by spoof?
They put up. They actually have electronics that spoof the phone number that they're calling from.
Oh, that hides the phone number that
Yeah.
they're calling from. Okay.
So it'll publish a fake phone number. So there's no way to call them back or actually know who called you.
Sort of like what, and we'll get into that, not right now, but what occurred with the threats that you're receiving, the death threats that
Yep.
you're receiving.
Yep.
And we won't talk about that right now.
Oh no, we can play some of those too.
Yeah, but I was saying we won't talk about. We'll go through this first.
But that's all they've got. Carefully, by being there and talked with. He'll tell you what. It's like it's pretty easy, and I have been for the past year for it. And
If you could
in
tilt that
fact,
microphone
I
down towards it too, Mike.
distinctly
Pardon?
recall going into
Tilt the
human
microphone down towards the
resources, and
computer.
There was another girl who had hurt her foot, and I donated 3 vacation days, 3 PTO days to her, saying,
This
I
is
know
about
how
being
she
injured at
feels
work.
because she had run out of vacation time, and I went, here is some vacation time, and I told
They
them at that
tore
time,
up my.
I can only give 3 days because I'm saving up my vacation time
This is me
for my
complaining to
surgery in
Boley, by the
November.
way, about.
I
Just
told them
stop this real quick.
It's like,
This is me telling Boley about just right when it happened that I had a on-the-job injury, and that I had done everything correctly by submitting the workman's comp paperwork, gave them the MRI and everything. They sent me out of the office, and I put all this information to them, and they tore it up and just fired me. And then whenever I'd apply for workman's comp, it was denied. As a consequence, I've had no medical treatment. And what people need to understand is that right now, I've the foot thing actually was also lower back, and that ended up leading to a spinal injury on the neck. And that was so severe, and I don't want to bore people with more, but I ended up with a 5mm egress on the spine in 4 different spots. And they had to do massive surgery a bit more than a year ago. And I have 4 titanium rings in my neck and a cage. That's why I can only go this far, and why I probably look a little odd when I try to turn things around. I don't have any mobility. My neck was shattered. The chief problem is that when that happened, that was on November 15th of 2017, and I was getting progressively number on my left side. I had paralysis setting in where I couldn't use my left arm. I couldn't walk. It was a wreck. And what happened was, and this was Jolie Russo that was the judge presiding at the time, and I kept saying, I need some kind of accommodations with an attorney appointed or something, because this is crazy. You can't do this. And she kept denying it. In fact, she had them send me 5.2 gigabytes of data, And what I was supposed to do is copy them, even though I was impoverished and had been granted in form of pauperous status by the courts, by the federal courts. I was supposed to print all 5.2 gigabytes of electronics data out. That was basically a mishmash of papers that Stroh Rees had, and was supposed to assemble them into documents, rescan them, make all of these into individual files by document type, some of which were 1 page, some of which may be 30 or 40 pages long, and then fill out a notebook with information on all of these pages, all these documents, and do it within 3 weeks. The ink, when I tried to do it, ended up costing me $2,000 just for the toner, and I got about a third of the way through and then ran out of time. I thought maybe if I was trying, at least you would grant more time. No, not going to happen. And what happened was in doing that is when the spinal injury got really bad, and that ended up impacting the electrical impulses to my heart. And I came down with atrial fibrillation and bradycardia, and my heart rate would actually go up to very rapid, 350 beats per minute.
That's atrial fibrillation. Yeah.
Yep. And but I also had atrial flutter, which in some ways is even worse. And I've got
WPW, Wolf Parkinson White, right?
yep.
So you had an aberrant electrical pathway that somehow hadn't been a problem for you before, because those things usually start off at a pretty young age, but somehow this cervical injury kicked it off.
They think that what this was actually caused by this.
By the cervical disease.
Yeah.
It's pretty severe. I've seen the MRI films. I mean, it's remarkable. It's pressing into the the disc is pressing into the spinal cord in at least 2 places, if not 3 or 4.
Well, like this is one of the, and I don't know if they can see it very well on the camera or not, but that is what it looks like. That's 2 of
Kind
the
of put it down a little bit lower, Mike. There you go. That's perfect. Yeah, I mean, you're basically your 3 and 4 are already fused together there.
Yeah.
You've lost the disc completely there.
Yep. And the impression, that's the spinal cord, where those 2 bulges are. And it impacted my ability. The reason I'm kind of hoarse right now is that I can't swallow. My swallow reflex is gone. I'm still partially paralyzed on the left side. I have bradycardia, and the bradycardia, basically my heart rate will drop down to 40 beats per minute, and I'll pass out on you. There's been, I don't know, a couple of months ago, about 2 months ago, I actually passed out and landed on the predecessor to this computer right here and crushed it, just smashed it to pieces, got all injured myself and ended up in the hospital. Happened on November 18th also.
Well, maybe we can go back to the bully, Mr. Wolf. You had that recording.
Yes, back to the recording from Mr. Wolf. And it's just fascinating stuff. Oh no. Ah, there it is.
If they're not saying that, they're being very, very dishonest. But it was common knowledge.
Okay.
Injured on the job. They were denying that they knew.
I appreciate your flexibility. I just wanted to be sure to be able to go through the documents I have on hand first. So I've got you down for Thursday at 3 p.m. And we'll go through the documents that you have at that time. Just so you're aware, on Thursday I'm gonna try to. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to control our discussion quite a bit.
I want you and everybody listening to this to realize on Thursday, I'm taking all the documents for whistleblowing up to Boley. They're getting hotspotter reports and all these other reports. So this stuff that we've talked about here, they got the actual evidence for.
And this is Mr. Wolf,
This is Mr. Wolf.
the
I
lawyer,
went to
Mr. Wolf
Boley.
from Boley, yes.
They got all of this stuff. So they had proof of all of this.
How did Mr. Boley seem to you as far as his demeanor towards you when you met with him?
Mr. Wolf, one of the things that was interesting as I was trying to get records, because I suspected that Trillium had hacked into my email and cloud accounts. I was a developer for Microsoft on the side, and so Microsoft had a cloud and an email account for me, and somehow or another, and I suspect it was the state, but there's no way to tell, found out about that account and found out what the password was. They logged into that account and were actually reading stuff. Around the end of September, they actually attempted to delete stuff from that account. They did delete stuff from that account. And I had backups that I'd made, because I didn't just keep it on the cloud. I kept it on the cloud because when I was at work and I would find new evidence, you couldn't plug in a drive and like a thumb drive and make copies of it because they could detect it. So what I would do is actually just run queries and stream that over to my into this cloud account and store some of the records of the wrongdoing that we're doing. So I had copies of lots of data, and I stored it on this cloud account. And when I would get home that night, I would store that off to an external hard drive. So I made backups of this stuff. So when Trillium went in and found out about this and they were reading it, what's really interesting is that during the same period of time, I was talking with some attorneys from Honeywell, and they were trying to get me to be an expert witness to defend that patent that I told you about earlier, where I had figured out how to do updates over the internet. Basically, the idea is to install a kernel and that stays in permanent memory, and that what you could do is flash an operating system, repairs, new codes over the internet without physically being there. And it was a new idea back in 1993. Nobody ever even thought of doing it. So I came up with how to do that when I was sitting there at Honeywell and Intermec, which was their subsidiary up in Everett, Washington. And it was worth a great deal of money, but they wanted me to defend the patent because they were being challenged by Apple and Verizon and Zebra and a couple of other companies. Zebra's a printer company. And so they wanted me to be an expert witness. Well, every one of those emails from an attorney, somehow or another, Trillium knew about them, and that's when they were hacking. I've got all their hacking records because I got them from Microsoft eventually, and Mr. Wolf was the one who got Microsoft to give me the records. They don't just hand those things out.
So Mr. Wolf was actually, his demeanor towards you was pretty positive then. He was trying to help you out, it sounds like.
Yeah, when you hear he's actually planning on, that's I think why he was dismissed, is that he was pushing very hard to get evidence of the wrongdoing. He was going to subpoena stuff from Trillium, and once he started pushing to get a hold of it, when he was gone. This happened with more than just him. It happened with other people too.
So was there anything more you wanted to play on the recording?
You want to hear the rest of this because he talks specifically about stuff.
Because I have specific information that I want to get to, and so I just want to kind of put you on notice that I'm probably going to kind of shut you down more often than I have been on topics that
I talk too much.
That I think are kind of secondary to the discrimination claim here in the complaint. And I don't do that to be rude. We have a limited amount of time. And there's 5 different statutory claims that we've got to cover on the complaint. So
They have 5?
FYI for Thursday.
Why is there 5?
Well, there's 2 statutory claims for the disability related things, and then there are. It's not really obvious the way that the complaint is drafted, but there's the
whistleblowing is, and I'll warn you ahead of time, the whistleblowing one is huge because it involves criminal payoff to politicians.
Sure, right, I understand. The one thing you should be aware of, however, is that it is not necessary for you to prove the underlying criminal activity to prevail on the retaliation claim. All that you need to show me is that you had a good faith belief that it was criminal activity, and that's probably pretty easy for you to do.
Oh yeah.
And then be able to show that Agate disciplined you or terminated your employment because of your reporting that. So it's not, because I have no authority to investigate securities fraud or
Sarbanes-Oxley,
violations of health insurance regulations or whatever else.
Dodd-Frank, and the ACA.
And nor am I competent to do so. I know very little about securities fraud. But the point, however, is that the underlying issue is kind of takes a backseat to the actual retaliation claim itself. So it's more important for you to provide the evidence that Agate was motivated by this issue than it is for you to provide evidence that the issue existed in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
But you have to realize
I'm
that,
looking at the employment claims only as that is the retaliation claim is part of it. So
and I have very little, actual information because HIPAA regulations prevent me from keeping
Had these records stored in an attorney.
patient files, names and things like this. And you can get into a tremendous amount of trouble by doing that. And so those were actually sitting on my workstation, which is why Arnold's law firm had sent them an order saying, don't destroy any of this. And they went ahead and did it. I mean, they wiped out my computer. That in and of itself is a criminal violation.
okay.
I mean, they've been busy destroying evidence.
Violent.
What they don't realize, perhaps, at least I'm hoping they don't, is that I stored some of this stuff in multiple locations
did.
because I
Somebody had
felt
bully passed
that
this
this
in
is
off to them.
precisely what
They
Patricia
destroyed
said
their
would
entire
do.
server
They would
farm.
attempt to cover this stuff up.
Did you? That's important. You need to go back and get that.
So we'll
This is precisely what Patrice and them would do. They would attempt to cover this stuff up. Regulations prevent me from keeping, patient files, names and things like this. And you can get into a tremendous amount of trouble by doing that. And so those were actually sitting on my workstation, which is why Arnold's law firm had sent them an order saying, don't destroy any of this. And they went ahead and did it. I mean, they wiped out my computer.
Who's
that
Arnold?
in and of itself is a criminal violation.
Who's Arnold Lachlan?
Yeah.
Who is he?
I mean, they've been busy destroying evidence. What they don't realize, perhaps, at least I'm hoping they don't, is that I stored some of this stuff in multiple locations because I felt that this is precisely what Patrice and them would do. They would attempt to cover this stuff up.
okay. So we'll go through all those details on Thursday.
What happened was that information went from Bully to Trillium, and Trillium destroyed their entire server farm. They went in and they found some of the evidence that I had in it. It's an interesting fact. One of the things you can do is you can create an invisible folder in Windows. And so and in Linux. And I created these invisible folders and had evidence stuck in them. And they had a server farm. They had, I don't know, maybe 30 different servers. And I controlled one of them called Tank, and I had everything on Tank. But I also had a bunch of them stuck on Saget and on another server. And what they ended up doing was somebody from this one group that was led by this kind of yucky other woman that worked there, that was in charge of it, and why she had like zero technical background, but she was in charge of the network group. And what they did is they went in looking around on behalf of Patrice, on orders from Patrice, and found this invisible folder and went, oh Lord, he's got everything in here. And what happened was Patrice then went, looking for the rest of this stuff, they couldn't find them. I hid them pretty well, and they could not get through the encryption stuff on that had on some of the files either. And what they did is they actually took down their entire server farm, probably $200,000 worth of computers. They destroyed them in order to destroy the data. And what's really interesting is I was told by a co-employee there that they did it at the suggestion of Stroh Reeves, who said, "Oh, there's a lot of fraud here, and the fine potentially from the court, if he gets discovery and you go, oops, this was accidentally destroyed, would be a lot less than having all this evidence come out." And what's the sad fact is that the evidence that I've got was stuff that it was okayed for me to collect, and I kept some of it. Had it stored with an attorney office because CMS had told me to keep it with an attorney because they were going to have it picked up by an investigator, and then I was given permission by the federal government to go collect it, which is why I've got it now. The evidence that I had over at Trillium that was destroyed by them went all the way up to September of 2013.
So let's get back to you. So you went to Boley. Mr. Wolf was there, and he filed the whistleblower papers, or at least he supposedly filed the whistleblower papers.
Yeah, and it's Sarbanes. Hear him talking about it. It's Sarbanes-Oxley, Dodd-Frank, ACA, and HIPAA.
Right.
And those, he specifically mentions those things. When I finally got a thing a year later, I said, and then that phone call, it was a year later, suddenly I got this filing from Boley where they had not investigated anything. They hadn't done anything. They had terminated Mr. Wolf, and what they had done was destroy the evidence. They leaked that back to Trillium. All the evidence was destroyed by Trillium's wiping out their server farm. And
then they tried to gaslight you.
Yeah.
Then they tried to tell you that you'd never even spoken to them, and then the next thing you know, you're pulling out a recording.
Oh yeah,
you
well,
recorded
I got more
everything.
than that. I mean, what you've got, and people aren't paying attention to it, especially the federal courts. Aiken is trying to cover this stuff up any way she can. So is Stroh Reeves. Is that these recordings prove criminal activity by the state of Oregon. If you go read Sarbanes-Oxley, Section 802, and it's really important. I mean, and I'm going to get it and read it to you right now. Find 802. It says right here that nothing in this section shall be deemed to diminish or relieve any person or any other duty or obligation imposed by federal or state law or regulation to maintain or refrain from destroying any document. What happened was Boley destroyed documents and altered documents. Their complaint that they ended up delivering to me in December is falsified, provably so, with those two things. It also contradicts the recording of Mr. Wolf, for which I have metadata. So you've got Boley not just in violation of their contract with federal OSHA and with the Department of Labor, and claiming that they don't have to follow the Department of Labor procedure. You've got proof of alteration.
Right. So
they can't do what they've done. Boley themselves, the state of Oregon themselves, is guilty of fraud. And it's not just mere fraud. It is fraud that's punishable by a $20 million fine and 20 years in prison for every person involved.
wow.
And we know the names of the people involved. You can go to Chris Lynch. You can go to Brad Avekian. You can go to people like Shelley in the employment department. We know who they are. You could literally prosecute them and put those people in prison for 20 years each.
So after this with Boley, what occurs after that? as far as
Well,
this progression towards the
because-
federal courts?
I filed with the EEOC as an appeal because Boley dismissed this thing administratively, and they only gave me the right to sue in state court.
How's that?
They can't do that, but that's what they did. And you have to understand, you have to go through all the procedures. When Boley says, okay, you only have the right to sue in state court, what that means is you have to appeal that in order to get it, and I'm going to get you what it says.
Yeah, that's what they tend to say here in Oregon, is you got to go through the state courts before you can go to the federal courts.
Yeah.
Which is a bunch of baloney, but
Well, this
it's
is
not true at all.
This is a federal issue because one of the problems you've got is that if you go to like the EEOC, this is the EEOC initial filing. This is the handoff to. This is January 23rd, which, mind you, is 10 days after Boley supposedly filed their complaint. And this is saying, this is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, the American with Disabilities Act. This is a EEOC filing. Age discrimination. This is special circumstances of sex, age, disability, retaliation, genetic information, and other. And this is the EEOC filing right here that was handed off to Boley.
Yeah, can't really make that out at all.
Well, anybody can have it if they call me.
Sure.
And we'll post it up online if you want it. And that'd be fine with me.
Anything you want to post?
Yeah, it's like this is an EEOC charge, and then there's also the Boley charge number. And so Boley essentially violated federal law right then and there. I mean, they broke their contract with the EEOC and with OSHA. They destroyed them. Then what's even worse is if you go to Boley's thing here on December 1st of 2014, this is after waiting for a year, but they say, encloses a copy of the complaint of unlawful discrimination you filed with the Civil Rights Division on January 13th, 2013. Notice the date?
Yeah.
And your complaint has been assigned to Jeremy Wolf. I'm sorry. That's the initial, the 2014 one. The other one where they dismissed it.
Now repeat that again, Mike, because it's a little unclear. You kind of changed things there a little bit. What?
This
are
is
those
this
dates
is
again?
the one from this is January 24th of 2014. It says, enclosed is a copy of the complaint of lawful discrimination you filed with the Civil Rights Division on January 13th, 2014. I never received this. And they're saying, your complaint has been assigned to Jeremy Wolf, senior investigator, phone number, blah, blah, blah. You will be contacted by your investigator. And they talk about this, and I'm kind of going, and then it's signed, and if you look at the sign thing to client, it's not my signature. So I don't know who, and you know what my handwriting looks like.
Yeah.
So
Again,
I have,
you can't really make it out, but
yeah, I have
that I
no
can't make
idea
out.
what this thing is. So it's like, it's just bizarre, and it's got, the thing that's really weird about it is that this is a notary seal right here. There's
you can see,
10 items. Well, watch this. There's 3 more items right here. And then down
Try
at
that
the
again,
bottom,
Mike.
all
Try-
by itself on a separate page, is that same darn notary seal all over again.
Put it at a little bit of an angle to the camera. I think that, no, not like that, more like twisting.
Like that.
No, twisting rotational. Like, slightly like that.
Like that.
The other direction. More. Okay. That actually, I can see that a lot better, but not clearly, but you can make it out. Otherwise, you're getting too much flashback from the camera.
Well, what it is it's basically the same notary stamp occurring twice on one document. What they did is they invented this thing.
So they notarized it once, and they went back and added more information and notarized it again, or they just
They took the.
they added stuff
They
post
actually
that
took,
date.
Since I have the originals that were done by the bully intake clerk, whose name was Monica Mosley. What they did is they took pieces of that, cut them out using Adobe Acrobat, pasted them into a document, got a hold of this notary stamp and signature, dumped that in, added 3 more items, and dumped it in again. I mean, they basically.
You think they did it on different days and used the same notary date?
Well, it looks like it, because the Monica Mosley has it says MM 1307-825 12/24/13. So it looks like one of the documents she had from December 24th of 2013 was used where they took these other 3 items that they tacked on to the end of this thing. So it's really hard to figure out what they were doing, why they did it, but it's pretty easy to figure out what they did. What they did is they contrived this. This is a fraud. This is not something that was ever written by me or by them in a legal fashion. This is something they invented.
And this came out of Boley.
This came out of Boley.
Okay.
This was invented by them.
Well, I've never seen.
The date on this, that's what you need to realize. The date on this is January 13th of 2014. Now, the Boley case is DPEM, blah, blah, blah. And if you go over to the U.S. Department of Labor case and you look at it, what was the date we just looked at on the Department of Labor case? It was January 23rd, 2 weeks later, with a whole bunch of federal complaints. December 1st is when I first saw this sucker. It's when they sent it to me. They said they had done it on January 13th, but I didn't get it, so I have no idea what the heck they're talking about. They have this thing that they ignore that happens 2 weeks later. This is the federal complaint, and then the whistleblower complaint that is a formal bully complaint that Mr. Wolf was reading from. Remember what he's saying, I have 5, and I'm going, you have 5? Okay, what are they? I'm trying to emphasize all this stuff to him. And what you end up with is what you've got is you've got Mr. Wolf contradicting this thing that was filed 2 months earlier.
What do you mean contradicting? The dates are
The
contradicting?
thing, what he's reading doesn't bear any resemblance at all to what they supposedly filed on January 13th. I mean, this.
And this was filed by Boley, right? There's
Right.
something filed by Boley, and you're coming back later on. You're meeting with him personally, or at least on the phone.
I met with him personally.
Especially in person, yeah, because you had to see the
And I've seen it.
whistleblower paperwork. And so, what do you think happened there?
Somebody at Boley fraudulently created a complaint. They illegally altered documents in violation of Sarbanes-Oxley and their contract with the federal government. The
So they were
January
trying
13th document is not possible. It's not possible because they hadn't even gotten the federal complaint yet. They don't get the federal complaint until 10 days later. Then what you've got on top of that is you've got this, that's January 23rd is when the federal complaint arrives. Then all of a sudden on March 3rd, and remember the statute of limitations for filing is not until March 26th, you've got March 3rd, you've got Jeremy Wolf calling me on the phone saying, yeah, here's the official complaint, and I'm reading it to you. And it's got stuff that doesn't exist on this one that they're claiming they filed on January 13th illegally.
Do you think they altered the federal
Of course
complaint
they
at all?
did. Of course they did.
So not only the state complaint
The
they altered.
state is complicit in trying to cover up for Trillium.
Right. But I mean, they altered, you feel that they altered the federal paperwork then too?
Yes.
Okay.
They're in violation of a half a dozen laws. It's like anybody who thinks that, and here's Bully's right to sue on December 1st, 2014. This letter is to inform you that the above cashing complaint by the Civil Rights Division has been administratively closed. That means they closed it without any investigation. They didn't do anything with it.
Right. Administratively means
this
that
is
they.
December 1st of 2014, a year after my filing. And then they're saying this, the Bureau of Bureau's final determination. If you disagree with this determination, you may wish to consult with an attorney on your rights to file a civil suit. Notice of right to file suit. Although your case has been closed pursuant to ORS 659A880, you have the right to file a suit in state circuit court, not in federal court, based on the allegations within 90 days from the date of this letter. No right in federal court. None whatsoever. What I did is I filed in federal court because they broke
Yeah, but
law.
you didn't get to federal court right away. So let's kind of get back into that line.
What I did is I filed with the federal court because Bully had committed fraud. Bully called me, and it was Mr. Lynch called me, and basically said that he was going to straighten this out and they were going to file whistleblower retaliation complaints correctly, the way they had promised to. Well, they didn't. They post-dated them a year after they actually the statute of limitations had run out, thinking they were being clever. And I went, that's not good enough. And so I filed suit in federal court, and they said, well, if you dismiss that, we'll fix it. So I dismissed that, and they dismissed the case. That's what this was. They lied to me, in other words.
Yeah.
Then what happened was I had appealed this thing to the EEOC when it first happened. The EEOC was having a huge investigation of it. And what they ended up doing is they kind of sided with their contractor because I had filed in federal court, and that's what Boley was saying is, well, because he filed in federal court, the law says that we don't have to continue the case anymore. And so he's dead. Well, it's a chicken before the egg thing because I filed in federal court because they lied and didn't do their job. But I was stuck. Supposedly what I should have done is gone to the EEOC rather than to federal court to begin with, rather than doing it at the same time. But I did it, and so what happened was the EEOC finally gave me a letter of a right to sue in federal court on April 23rd of 2015. It actually took them that long. No, April 22nd. April 22nd, 2000. You initially filed your charge with Bully on January 13th, 2014 under their charge number, blah, blah, blah. And then you began with a charge with the EEOC on January 21st, 2014 under their thing. The EEOC was closed as a duplicate to Bully, okay? Mind you, all these federal statutes they're referring to that don't appear on the Bully thing on January 19, 2014. And the EEOC and Bully operate under a working work-share agreement, which means that when you filed your charge with Bully, the same was filed with EEOC. So all of these charges that I have listed on that EEOC filing, supposedly Bully has, they're not there. They're not in their thing. They don't exist. Bully scrubbed the record of them. And they also altered dates. Now, the Bully charges on February 19th, 2014. They got they had this one other letter, the filing thing, on January 23rd. I mean, there's something really, really, really wrong in this whole thing. And Bully covered it up.
Well, this is extremely important information, Mike, not just for those of us that already live in Oregon, but anyone considering moving to Oregon. Now, I know we've got problems across this country. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But it seems to be that they're magnified here in the state of Oregon because for some reason they feel that they're no longer under federal law at any level. So anyone that's thinking about coming to this state should really consider not, because they don't play by the same rules as the rest of the country does.
Unless you're a corrupt business. If you're a corrupt business, Oregon is the place to be.
Right.
If
Unless
you're a dirty
corrupt.
corporation, Oregon is the place to come to.
So come to Oregon if you want to be a crook. If you
That's
want to
right.
avoid criminality and have courts that function and politicians that function, then go to another state.
Yep.
They may not be much better, but they're going to still be better.
If you're a Chinese or a North Korean corporation, Oregon is the place to be.
So, again, so you did file those papers. You never really, I mean, you filed in federal court, but you didn't end up in federal court like you ultimately have been. So, again, we're moving along. You filed with Boley because you had a whole interaction where you're trying to get your unemployment, you're trying to get your workman's compensation. I mean, you went through a whole ordeal with that.
I won.
I know.
That's
So
the thing that's
let's
crazy
move into that. What happened there?
When I filed for unemployment, I was turned down, and I went to actually Nanette Woods, who's the head of human resources, said that I was
At Trillium.
at Trillium.
Yeah.
Said that I had sexually harassed my Amanda Kopp. Didn't say that she was my supervisor, and it's like that's just not true. It's like I was disgusted by her. I've got letters that I actually.
Well, she was your supervisor because when you went and reported everything that was going on during that meeting, Patrice Korjenik and the rest of the crew demoted you and also demeaned and abused you. You were put under the tutelage of Amanda Cobb. You were her inferior. She was your superior. Your
She was my
supervisor.
superior.
Yeah.
And what really gets me, it says right here, this is a thing. It's been more than a week since I was placed on administrative. In that time, you have ascertained that I never made any suggestive or inappropriate remark, never engaged in any physical, never flirted, never instigated any contact with Ms. Cobb. I merely reciprocated her clear desire for friendly contact. She basically set up a Facebook account for me and every other employee in the analytics group. That was a demand of hers. I said, to the contrary, Ms. Cobb had made comments to me that any person would regard as suggestive or inappropriate. Those actually came out in the administrative court in Oregon when I applied for unemployment, where she had said that she had an abrasion from shaving. And I went, what?
She told you that she had an abrasion from shaving, and it was her genital area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It wasn't her leg, it was
and
her
when she was
genitalia.
telling me about picking up guys at bars and sleeping with them. And
And she'd sleep to get contracts too, wouldn't she?
Pardon?
She'd sleep with people to get contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is stuff that I was told by her, and I'm going, this is crazy. It's like, I'm not interested in any kind of a romantic relationship with this woman. I was actually disgusted by her, and
Well, she was what, half your age?
well, but she was she was a little mixed up. And one of the things,
But you're married and you're a spiritual, religious person. This isn't your bag to go and have affairs with other women, especially women that are much younger, and especially unstable women.
it's one of the things that bothers me about all of this thing is that the amount of dishonesty by these people. I can't do anything more than just tell the truth. But it's been.
Well, this
I
wasn't
tell
the first
truth and
time
they
she did this.
They end up smirking. And it's like when I went to this court, this administrative court before Judge Monroe, they ended up saying that I had invited Cobb out dancing. Well, at that time, when it was the Eugene celebration, I had phone records showing that I was home all weekend. Actually, I was at a friend's house, Paul Christensen, who had bladder cancer, and he was dying, and I was with him for part of the weekend at his house, and then the rest of the time I was at home because the right foot was in a cast. It was broken with the bone. You saw the pictures of the bone where it came to the top of the foot.
Right.
I hadn't had surgery yet. It was a wreck. This was December. He died December 31st, and the weekend of the Eugene celebration was August 23rd of 2013. And so they claimed that I was out dancing, and had been drinking, and I wasn't drinking. I was home with my wife and with Paul Christensen, and with his kids, and I couldn't dance if my life depended on it because I was in a wheelchair.
Yeah, your foot
This
was
foot was
broken.
This foot here had a media cart fall on it at work because they were harassing me for standing up in this staff meeting and complaining about them racially profiling patients, especially kids and seniors. And what they ended up doing was saying that I had to come in and clean up my cubicle, even though I was in a cast and on crutches, at 6 o'clock in the morning on Monday, August 19th. And so I came to work early, and there was some of the people from the network group that were there, and they told me they'd been directed not to help me or they'd be fired. So I had to go do this on my own. I had to actually load up stuff in my office on a media cart and then push it, crutch up to it, push it, crutch up to it, push it, crutch up to it, all the way out to an outside dumpster, and then throw it in the garbage and then come back in. When the media cart fell on my foot, it caused all of those problems. It was swelling up, and I called the after-hours nurse at Slocum Orthopedic, and she told me to go to the emergency room, and I went, that's the last thing in the world I need to do right now because Corgenic would just have a fit. So I ended up going home at 9:33 that morning. I was home, and Nanette Woods called me at home, and I've got telephone records of that. Spoke with me for 9 minutes at home, got a description of what had happened, and then fired me. And I called, and I didn't know she'd fired me because I was supposed to be telecommuting from home, and I found out when I tried to log in after talking with her, and she'd had me disconnected. I called the IT head, my head of the IT department, my former boss, and he said that the rumor was floating around is that I had quit. And I went, what? Why did I quit? And he went, I don't know, you just got angry and stomped out of the office. And I said, I had told Corgenic secretary and several co-workers, and I also called after-hours nurse, that the media cart had fallen on my foot and had caused it and the right foot to start swelling to where it was swelling inside the cast where it cuts off the blood supply. And I was told to go home and apply ice to all this stuff, or I was going to have to go to the emergency room, have everything cut off, and then it was going to be a really huge mess. And it was very clear the next day a group of visitors were showing up, and Corgenic that was the excuse for cleaning up my cubicle, is that the visitors were running a class from Ingenics, and if I was not there, I was fired. So, but Woods had fired me. So it's like, it was very confusing as to what the heck was going on.
So just playing games. And so,
well, they were basically, and I've got emails, phone recordings, as well as phone records for all of this stuff. And it's like, they were just screwing around with me. I got to tell you, it was hell on earth. I mean, being called chief, having them claim, and Corgenic kept trying to sell Cobb to me, saying, well, wouldn't you like to have a relationship with her? And I'm going, no. I mean, she was suggesting it.
well, this is something that this wasn't the first instance. I mean, obviously, Amanda Cobb was used as a pawn, a piece to
Fire 5 different whistleblowers
Exactly.
in exactly the same circumstances.
exactly to use sexual harassment, which they know is a very hot button, hot potato issue, a Me Too movement, and all that other stuff. And they knew that they had you.
There was no Me Too in those days. What their
Well,
problem was
it's forming.
is that I was provably not there the weekend of the Eugene celebration. I was in a wheelchair. I had both feet in casts, couldn't dance. I don't drink.
Yeah.
They had all of these huge problems lined up. This went in front of the administrative judge. What really cost him was that I said, you had advertised for an H-1B worker, and they denied it. Well, the fact of the matter is, they hired a Mr. Anderson, who was an H-1B worker out of
Netherlands,
no, he's in Denmark.
Denmark. Okay.
And they hired him the week before. So it's like they lied. And when they got caught, what happened was the judge said her finding was that I was terminated without cause. Well, that really screwed him up. Korjenik, Copeland, Wiest, and two Neely, as well as Kristen Leonard, all met with Kitzhaber in his office in Salem in early January.
Who were
And
those names again? I'm sorry.
it was Copeland, Korjenik, Wiest, and Kristen Leonard and Kevin Neely met with Kitzhaber in his office.
Was it there a sixth person too?
Yeah, there were several of them. I can't remember all the names, but anyway, they met with it was one of his aides. I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, they met with Kitzhaber, and he set up this board. Well, they have this thing called the Employment Appeals Board in Oregon. He set this one up with only 2 people with the special rules to where they don't have any laws. They can do anything they want. One of those board members was named Tony Corcoran, who is a former state senator who is buddies with Floyd Prozansky, and who's also friends with Trillium's executives and got tons of money from them.
Copeland, yeah.
And also the other one was a hack crony of
Susan Rossiter,
yeah of
aide and a private attorney.
Yep, of Kitzhaber. And what they ended up doing is forming this board. And what's really crazy is that they, for some reason or other, and they had to have gotten it from Korjenik, they picked November 23rd of 2012, a year before. And they had this exchange of emails between Cobb and I where supposedly I'm trying to give Christmas gifts to her and to everybody else in it. And she's rejecting them. And she's saying, leave me alone. You're bothering me, and this is harassment. And I'm going, and it's now coming out a year later. And I was really bugged by it. Well, I checked my medical records and found out that day I wasn't even in the office. So while all this is taking place, I'm actually at, and I'm not going to tell you, I'll tell you, but I won't make it public. I had gone to my primary care doctor who had seen me, and I'd also gone to a doctor because they'd found a growth on my throat. They, prior to that, had found a growth in the lower lobe of my right lung. So they're checking me for lung cancer.
A mass.
Yeah, it's a mass. And they were checking me for throat cancer and lung cancer, and they were, and I was obviously really upset about the whole thing. They'd had me on, the doctor had put me on, before that, because I was really upset about this, on Ambien and Paxil because I couldn't sleep and I was really anxious. And I had a bad reaction. So I don't take mood altering drugs. I just don't like them. I don't drink. You've been to your house, you'll find I don't drink alcohol, I don't take drugs on purpose because I have a really horrible reaction to them usually. And so what was happening was ended up just hallucinating and getting really, really depressed from them, and told the Dr. Beckstrand, and she went and pulled me off of them. And it took about, that was on that date, on November 23rd, and it took about 3 weeks for them to completely disappear from my system. But I was like suicidally depressed. I've never been that depressed before in my life, since. It was awful.
So Mrs. Cobb, Amanda Cobb, was used basically as a honeypot It might be the vernacular that you use, but she didn't even show up to the hearing with the ALJ.
I don't
All this
think she-
information was given as third-party information. In fact, that's one of the big reasons why Judge Kay Monroe ruled in your favor and said that you were.
Yeah, because they're unsigned statements. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't
and she
believe
believed
in
you
Cobb
because
either.
you were there for yourself. You were first-hand information. They had Patrice Korjenik. She shouldn't have. Why wasn't Amanda Cobb there? Do you know?
I don't think Cobb took place in it. I think she might now. I don't know. Cobb now is for Centene. She's the head of Medicaid.
Medicare, I thought.
Direct of Medicaid, not Medicare.
Medicaid, okay.
So of Medicaid services. So she's kind of a high mucky muck. She was never the most honest of people. I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw her, and I suspect that she would do anything for money.
Yeah.
But it's like I say, I've got all of these letters where I'm talking about all of that, and I read you some of them, and I've got more of them. It's like, never made any suggestive remarks or anything like that.
Yeah. It obviously was a scam. So
Well, it was more than a scam. It's like this one thing I complained about her inappropriately touching me. She would come into my office, or I would wheel myself in this stupid chair over to her office, and they claimed that because I was wheeling the chair over to her office when called, that I was blocking the entrance. Well, of course I was blocking the entrance. I wasn't capable of walking. I was in a wheelchair, which I couldn't use back there in Cubicle Row. I was in one of these wheeled chairs, and so I was pushing myself up when she would call me to her office to tell me something. And when I would go there, what Korjenik said is, well, she was blocking the entrance to her office. Well, yeah. It's because I was denied any kind of accommodations that are required under the ADA.
Yeah.
And they destroyed all of their records. I happened to keep these emails, fortunately. And I said, on one occasion she was fatting herself and claiming to have hot classes. On another occasion, she showed me some details of an encounter where she picked up men at night clubs. In a Facebook comment on another occasion, she talked about an abrasion, and then at work she said that it was from shaving. This is all email stuff that went to Woods well before I was terminated. These were complaints
they have documents
about
of,
Cobb.
yeah.
And what really gets me, and this is in writing again too, I said, you had me write up a detailed report on the code, location of code, and details about the days to run on my normal work ethic. 2 weeks before this secret complaint, which they didn't tell me about, was filed. What they'd asked me to do is they said, well, we're finally, because they denied me time off for surgery in spite of the fact that the doctors said I needed to take off time for surgery because it was doing permanent damage. They finally said, well, we're going to approve you for time off for surgery, verbally. This was Korjenik. I've got that phone call too. And what happened was, and that was in August, and now we're in September, and what happened was Korjenik asked me to write up a report on a white paper on what reports I needed to write, because I did a web page for PCP assignment. I did all of medical management's reporting. I did web page design, medical management stuff, and then I ran all of the Ingenix code. And so I was supposed to train co-workers and everything up on doing this 2 weeks before they fired me. And then they had a secret report where they canned me for doing it.
So again, you go to an administrative law judge hearing, and you win that case because you were fired without cause.
Yep.
And even though they tried to say it was cause, they made a
There
bunch
was
of
no
lies.
cause. They were proved to, they perjured themselves in that court.
Right. They
and
said
got
it was for
caught.
cause, the Trillium, but it wasn't for cause. So then you go to this secret tribunal, this star chamber type of situation.
No. I didn't go to them. They were appointed.
You never even sat in front of them?
No.
Oh, they just
And
reviewed
I
records.
actually wrote them a note saying, look, this is contrived evidence that you got. This is not true. And furthermore, the administrative judge said this stuff was over a year old. It's not even allowed in the court.
Now, how does something like that hold? Just the fact that
Because they can
just
I
do
read
it because
you
they
the
have
rules.
immunity.
I read you the rules. They can operate. They operate with not just immunity. They operate completely outside of the law.
Yeah.
And I tried to read that to you. That's why it's really important. Where's that at? The document. There's docs. And if we go down to the U.S. Supreme Court, here again, and that's why it's really important for people to look at this thing. It says, this board shall adopt procedural rules proposed by the Employment Appeals Board necessary for the discharge of the board's duties. Such rules need not conform to common law or statutory rules of evidence and other technical rules of procedure. That's in writing. They could do and did do anything they wanted. And what they did was they cobbled together a fake document that was used by Carolyn D. Walker, and Carolyn Walker wrote the decision, who is Agate's attorney for this board.
Agate's attorney, and she worked for Stoll Reeves.
She worked for Stoll Reeves, and she was Agate's attorney
In fact,
wrote the decision for the board.
In fact, she was one of the partners of Stoll Reeves.
Yep.
But for some reason, in 2018, she left and started her own practice, which would be an interesting story if we knew more about it.
It would probably be really interesting since she supposedly works for Black Lives Matters, and I don't think Black Lives Matters have the slightest idea of how many black children were hurt by her.
Well, they're going to have an idea here very soon. Once they get all this information, they're going to know exactly who Carolyn D. Walker is. And will that matter to them or not? We'll find out.
I don't think it does. The fact of the matter is that there is a lot of people that have been hurt by this outfit. Not just this. It started with Trillium, but it's not just Trillium. It's Trillium. It expands up to Bully. It then goes to OSHA, because OSHA is involved in this thing. The last thing in the world they want to do is go after Bully and Oregon OSHA, in spite of these recordings, for violating all kinds of laws. But nobody wants to touch this because they view it as a political hot potato, because it shows so much widespread corruption.
Well, we know how they played it with Secretary Dennis Richardson's role as Secretary of State. They started playing the game of this is partisan politics. He's using this for himself, when in reality what he was doing is he was discovering what they were up to, which was a lot of nefarious activities. But let's take a little break here, Mike. Let's take a few minute break here.
Okay.
Yeah.